You want to know what is actually happening right now with Claressa Shields, the two-time Olympic gold medalist, the self-proclaimed greatest woman of all time, the GWAT herself. And I need you to sit with this for a second, because the woman who just told the whole internet, I check everybody that say that, is standing in the middle of the loudest, longest, most damaging scandal cycle of any active fighter in her weight class. And she still cannot understand why the conversation will not move. She just cannot figure it out. She sits down in interview after interview. She gets asked one soft question about the noise around her personal life, and she cuts the interviewer off. Never. You don't feel like it's overshadowing your talent? And she says no. She corrects everybody. She checks everybody. And then she stands up and walks away like she just handled it. She did not handle it. She confirmed it. Because the thing she keeps missing, the thing every single person in her camp is apparently too scared to tell her, is that the reason everybody is saying the same thing is not because everybody is coordinated against her. It is because everybody is looking at the same evidence, and the evidence keeps piling up, and the August 15th card in Atlanta is not the comeback she thinks it is. It is the receipt. And the part one really need you to hear before we go any further, the part that is going to make this whole video make sense, the reason the BET Awards did not give her Sportswoman of the Year, the reason Papoose had to jump on the internet and complain about it, the reason the sponsorships are not landing, the reason the arenas are not selling out the way an undisputed champion should sell out, is not the boxing. It has never been the boxing. It is the pattern. And the pattern goes back further than Remy Ma. And when we get to the industry breakdown around the middle of this video, I promise you we are getting there. You're going to understand why the last 2 years of her career were not a run of bad luck. They were the natural, predictable consequence of a decision she made in a DM. And everybody who told her to double down on it is not standing next to her right now. They are gone. And she is checking everybody who mentions it, because she has nothing else left to check. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So let's set the whole table here, because a lot of you are just now tuning into this story, and I do not want anyone lost. Claressa Shields is, by the numbers, an accomplished fighter. 2 Olympic gold medals in London 2012 and Rio 2016. Nobody is taking that from her, and I am not here to take that from her. She turned pro, she moved up. She reportedly won titles across multiple weight classes, and the record currently sits at 18 wins and 0 losses, with 3 knockouts. Those are the surface facts. That is what her camp wants you to lead with. Now here is what her camp does not want you to lead with. And here is where the story starts to actually get interesting. Papoose, the Brooklyn rapper, husband of Remy Ma for 9 years, publicly filed for divorce, and shortly after that filing, Remy Ma allegedly went on record and pointed directly at Claressa Shields, accusing Shields of being in her husband's DMs while they were still married. Papoose has denied cheating. Shields has denied the timeline. They now appear together publicly. They attended the 2026 BET Awards together. And Papoose has been calling out media outlets for what he says are unfair characterizations. That is the surface version. And if that were the entire story, this would not be a 2-year news cycle. It would have died months ago. But it has not died. It will not die. And the reason it will not die is because every time it starts to fade, Claressa herself does something to bring it back. An interview, a live stream, a comment section meltdown, a call-out. And the algorithm feeds on that oxygen. And the story lives another week. So when she sits in front of a camera and says, it's not overshadowing my talent, I check everybody who says that, you have to understand what she is really saying. She is saying, I know it is overshadowing my talent, and I am furious that I cannot make it stop. And the only tool I have left is to yell at anyone who names it out loud. That is not a champion's response. That is a woman who reportedly built a house on a fault line and is now angry the walls keep cracking. And the stakes here are not small. Personally, it is her image, her sponsorship pipeline, and her ability to sell a pay-per-view. Culturally, it is the entire conversation around whether women's boxing can be marketed on excellence alone, or whether it needs the reality TV drama layer to survive. And systemically, and this is where we're going to end up before this video is over, it is a question about how the sports and entertainment industries decide who gets protected and who gets left out to dry. And I am telling you right now, she has been left out to dry, and she still does not see it. Let me walk you through the visible evidence, the stuff anybody with a phone can go verify tonight, because I want everyone on the same page before we get into the deeper layers. Piece 1. The interview cycle itself. Go back and watch the last 4 or 5 sit-down conversations Claressa has done in 2025 and 2026. Watch what happens whenever the subject of Papoose, Remy, or the noise around your personal life comes up. She cuts the interviewer off. She interrupts. She says never, before the sentence is even finished. She corrects the framing, and then she smiles and says she is unbothered. Unbothered people do not interrupt. Unbothered people let the question finish, and then move on. What you are watching is a person who has rehearsed her deflection so many times that the deflection triggers before the question even lands. That is not composure. That is a trained flinch. Piece 2, the Breakfast Club sit-down that Claressa did alongside Papoose earlier this cycle. This one is important because it is the moment the two of them tried to control the narrative together, and you can watch in real time how it does not work. Papoose is asked about the split from Remy Ma. He gives his version. Claressa jumps in, adds context, and the internet immediately clips it and turns it into a 2-week discourse cycle about whether her timeline lines up with his timeline, whether her version lines up with what Remy Ma said in her own posts. The Shade Room ran it. Complex ran it. Every hip-hop blog with a pulse ran it. And Claressa's response to that coverage was, you guessed it, check everybody. Piece 3, the BET Awards moment. She was reportedly nominated in a Sportswoman of the Year category. She did not win. Papoose immediately went on social media and called out the BET Awards, listed her accomplishments, questioned the snub, and demanded an explanation. And here is what nobody in her camp seems willing to say out loud. An undisputed multi-division champion, in a normal universe, does not need her boyfriend to publicly beg an awards show to explain a snub. She wins or she loses gracefully, and life continues. The fact that Papoose had to jump in and defend the resume tells you the resume is not carrying the weight it should be carrying. And the reason it is not carrying the weight is not the boxing. The boxing is fine. The boxing is undefeated. The reason is the noise. Piece 4, the August 15th card in Atlanta. She is scheduled to face Kay Scott at State Farm Arena for a middleweight unification, and the undercard, at least according to what has been floating around social media, includes a lot of names that are not traditional boxing names. Reality TV figures, internet personalities, people whose fan bases are, let us say, adjacent to boxing rather than inside it. Now look, filling a card with entertainment personalities is not automatically a red flag. Jake Paul built a career on it. But when you are the undisputed champion, and the pitch to the general public is come see the champion defend her belt, and the way you sell the card is by loading it up with reality TV crossover talent, that is a signal. That is the promoter and the fighter looking at the projected ticket sales for the main event alone, seeing a gap, and filling that gap with novelty. It is not the flexor camp is presenting it as. It is a workaround. And every piece of that workaround was reportedly necessary because her name, on its own, is not moving what it should be moving. And the reason it is not moving is not because women's boxing is small. Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano have proven that number wrong 3 times over. The reason is her. And oh, do I have more for you? Because if you thought the surface layer was rough, wait until you see what the people actually inside the culture are saying. Because this next section is going to make her fan base very, very uncomfortable. And I want the ones who are still defending her in the comments to sit with this section especially. Because we are about to name names, and we are about to walk through the pattern of reactions from people who do not have to lie to you about her. And the last piece I am going to drop, before we get to the industry breakdown, is going to reframe the entire fight card in Atlanta in a way you have not heard anywhere else. So let us go to the cultural layer, the insider reactions, the people who move in and around the culture, and whose word carries weight. Start with Remy Ma herself. Remy did not sub. Remy did not hint. Remy did what a woman of that caliber does when she is done playing. She reportedly went directly at Claressa by name, made specific claims about the DM situation, made a comment about how Claressa looked that lit up every hip-hop blog for a week, and then Remy went silent. And Remy staying silent is more damaging than Remy talking, because it lets the internet do the work for her while she keeps her dignity intact. That is a chess move. That is a woman who has been in the industry for 2 decades and understands that the person who cannot stop talking loses. Claressa cannot stop talking. Remy has not needed to talk in months. Look at whose brand grew and whose brand shrank in that exchange. That is the culture speaking. Second, Papoose himself. And I know this is going to be uncomfortable for the Papoose fans, but we have to be honest here. Papoose has spent the last cycle putting out receipts, denying cheating, defending the relationship, calling out media outlets, calling out award shows. That is a lot of defense. That is a lot of energy being spent explaining a situation that a genuinely secure situation does not require you to explain. And here is the thing about receipts in a public relationship. The moment you have to drop them, you have already lost the room. The room does not need convincing when the story is clean. The room needs convincing when the story has a hole in it. And every time he goes on the internet to plug the hole gets more attention. It is a losing pattern, and Remy Ma is watching it from the sideline, saying nothing, letting the algorithm eat. Third, the reactions from other women in and around hip-hop and combat sports. And I want to be careful here, because I do not want to lump people together who did not sign up to be lumped together. But it has been widely observed that the reception Claressa gets from other prominent women in the culture has cooled significantly over the last 2 years. The collabs are not there. The public cosigns are not there. When she posts, the comment sections from verified accounts are noticeably thin compared to what an undisputed champion in the middle of a promotional run should be pulling. That is not a coincidence. That is a culture quietly signaling something. Fourth, and this is the one that I think is the most important cultural signal of all, Laila Ali. Because Laila Ali represents something that Claressa reportedly cannot stand. And that is a woman in combat sports who is defined by her class, her carriage, her presentation, and her ability to be respected in and out of the ring without ever making a story about her chaos. Every time Laila Ali's name comes up in the same conversation as Claressa's, the contrast is brutal, and it is brutal because it is true. And to be fair to Claressa, she has responded to this. She has said in her own words that she could dress up, she could get her hair together, she could conduct herself the way Laila does if she wanted to. And I want to give that response its full weight, because it is the most honest thing she has said in 2 years. She just told you the difference. Laila does not have to try. Claressa says she could if she chose to. That is not a comeback. That is a confession. That is her admitting that the version of her the public keeps rejecting is a version she has been choosing. Now let me acknowledge the counter-argument here, because it deserves to be acknowledged. There are people in Claressa's camp and fan base who will say, she is authentic, she is from Flint, she is unpolished on purpose, she is not going to code switch for the industry. And that is her right. And you know what? I agree. That is her right. Nobody has to code switch. But you also do not get to choose to be unpolished, and then be furious when the polished spaces do not embrace you the way you feel entitled to be embraced. You made a choice. Live in the choice. Do not check everybody who names it. And that brings us to the hardest cultural read of all, which is that the reason the story will not die is not because the media is picking on her. It is because she personally will not let it die. Every time it fades, she posts. She goes live. She calls in to a YouTube stream. She responds to a comment. She names a Tasha K. She names an EGO. She names a Taseki. She feeds it. And the algorithm eats. And the story lives another week. And the cycle repeats. And it is going to repeat right through August 15th. So let me pivot here, because we have been talking about the entertainment layer for a while, and I promised you we were going to the industry layer. And this is where the whole thing stops being a gossip story and becomes something much bigger. Here is the pattern interrupt, and I need everyone to focus, because we are about to leave the drama layer entirely and talk about how the machine actually works. Everything I've been describing, the DMs, the divorce, the award snub, the interview meltdowns, the reality TV undercard, the shrinking cosigns from a culture. None of that is the real story. All of that is symptoms. The real story is structural, and it is about how women's combat sports gets marketed in the modern streaming and pay-per-view economy, and about the very specific position Claressa Shields occupies in that economy, and about why the position she is in was never sustainable in the first place. So let me walk you through it in 3 layers. Layer 1, the women's boxing economy. Women's boxing, as a commercial product, is still small. It punches above its weight critically, and Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano proved that a well-marketed women's fight can headline Madison Square Garden and generate real pay-per-view numbers. But that fight worked because both fighters brought clean, marketable narratives. Taylor is the Irish national hero. Serrano is the Puerto Rican multi-division champion. Neither of them was fighting through a 2-year scandal cycle. Neither of them was walking into every press event with the media wanting to ask about a divorce filing. The women's boxing product, at this stage of its development, cannot absorb a headliner whose off-ring narrative is louder than her in-ring narrative. It is too small a market. It does not have the built-in audience of, say, the NBA, which can absorb any player's personal chaos because the league itself is the draw. In women's boxing, the fighter is the draw. And if the fighter's brand is compromised, the draw is compromised. And Claressa's brand, at this exact moment, is measurably compromised. That is not an opinion. Look at the ticket movement. Look at the sponsorship activity. Look at how her promotions are being structured around undercard novelty rather than main event star power. The market is telling you what it thinks. Layer 2. The sponsorship and endorsement pipeline. Sponsorship deals in combat sports flow through a very specific evaluation process. Brands look at Q ratings, they look at social sentiment, they look at controversy exposure, and they look at what is called brand safety risk. When a fighter is in the middle of an active, ongoing scandal cycle that includes allegations of an affair with a married man, public feuds with the estranged wife who is herself a beloved cultural figure, and a track record of combative interviews and social media meltdowns, that fighter's brand safety score drops. And when the brand safety score drops, the deals dry up. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. A meeting that would have happened does not get scheduled. An extension that was assumed does not get renewed. A cameo in a national campaign goes to someone else. And by the time the fighter looks around and notices, 12 months have passed and the pipeline has shrunk to a trickle. That is not conspiracy. That is how the industry works. And that reportedly is what has happened here. Layer 3. And this is the deepest layer, and the one I really want you to sit with, the awards and institutional recognition economy. This is where the BET Awards moment becomes so much more revealing than it looks on the surface. Institutional awards do not just reward performance. They reward marketability. They reward the ability to be a public-facing representative of a category without generating additional headaches for the institution. When BET nominates a Sportswoman of the Year, they are not just asking who won the most fights. They are asking who can walk on our stage, in front of our sponsors, in front of our advertisers, in front of our broader audience, and not create additional risk for us. And when they made the call they made this year, they made a marketability judgment, not an athletic judgment. Papoose can call them out. He can list her accomplishments. He can demand an explanation. But he is arguing the athletic case in a room that already agreed on the athletic case. The room made a marketability call. And the marketability call is downstream of the last 2 years of the exact behavior we have been documenting in this video. So when you connect all 3 layers, the shrinking product market for women's boxing, the drying sponsorship pipeline, and the cooling institutional recognition, what you are actually looking at is not a run of bad luck. You are looking at a systemic response by the industry to a brand that has generated too much off-product noise for the industry to comfortably promote. And the tragic part, the part that is genuinely sad to say out loud, is that the boxing is fine. The boxing was never the problem. She could have been the crossover star of women's combat sports. She had the record, she had the medals, she had the personality, she had all of it. And she reportedly made one series of choices and doubled down on those choices publicly, and refused to acknowledge the cost of those choices. And now the industry is quietly rerouting around her. That is the real story. That is the story her camp does not want you to piece together. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And this is where I have to say the thing that I have been building to this entire video, because everything I have shown you leads to one conclusion, and I am not going to soften it. Claressa Shields did not lose to the media. She did not lose to Remy Ma. She did not lose to Tasha K or to Taseki, or to any of the individual figures she keeps naming and checking. Claressa Shields lost to a decision she reportedly made in a DM, and to every subsequent decision she made to defend that first decision publicly instead of quietly. And I want to walk through this slowly, because the weight of this matters. When Remy Ma first pointed the finger, Claressa had a choice. She could have said nothing. She could have let the situation resolve itself in private. She could have let Papoose handle his own divorce on his own timeline, without turning it into a joint publicity project. Instead, according to the pattern that has played out in public, she chose to lean in. Public appearances, joint interviews, a joint sit-down on the Breakfast Club, where she reportedly weighed in on his divorce, which is not something a new girlfriend has any strategic reason to do. Every one of those moments was a choice to make the story bigger, not smaller. And every time the story got bigger, her leverage got smaller. And here is the truth bomb, the part one need everyone to hear. The reason the boxing does not overshadow the scandal is not because the boxing is not impressive. It is because she personally, in her own public choices, week after week, has decided to place the scandal above the boxing in her own content stream. Look at her posts. Look at her live streams. Look at what she chooses to respond to. She responds to the scandal faster than she responds to boxing news. She talks about her critics more than she talks about her opponents. She names Tasha K in interviews. She names random YouTubers in comment sections. She reportedly called into a live stream to defend herself against rumors. That is a person whose content strategy is scandal forward, whether they realize it or not. The boxing is not overshadowed by the culture. The boxing is overshadowed by her. And the consequences of that are catastrophic for a fighter at this stage of her career. Because in combat sports, your window of peak marketability is short. 5 years, maybe 7 if you are lucky. She has burned 2 of those years, arguably the 2 most important years. The years right after the Olympics-era momentum could have been converted into mainstream crossover, arguing with critics online. That is time she cannot get back. That is deals she cannot unlose. That is a version of her career that no longer exists. And every day she spends checking everybody who mentions the scandal is another day that version drifts further out of reach. The BET Awards did not snub her. The sponsors did not abandon her. The culture did not turn on her. She traded the crossover run for a comment section war. And the trade is not reversible. And the hardest part of all of this to say out loud is that a lot of the people around her had to have known. Somebody in her camp had to have said, we need to change the strategy. Somebody had to have said, you are naming too many enemies in public. Somebody had to have said the August 15th card should be about you, not about the reality TV undercard. And either those people said it and she did not listen, or those people never said it because they were afraid to, or those people are not in her camp anymore because they said it and got pushed out. Any of those 3 explanations is a red flag. All 3 of them together are a 5-alarm fire. That is the truth bomb. That is the real music to face. As the elder in the competitor's script put it, nobody did this to her. She did this to herself. And she will not stop doing it, because stopping would require admitting that the last 2 years were a mistake, and everything about her public posture, the checking, the correcting, the naming, the calling in, says she is not willing to admit that. So the pattern continues. And so do the consequences. But here is the resolution, and I want to end this on something honest, because a video like this can feel heavy, and I do not want you to leave feeling only heaviness. The reason this story matters, the reason we are talking about it at all, is because there is a right way to carry yourself in this industry, and the right way is still winning. Remy Ma has said, reportedly, very little in the last several months. She has not needed to. She let the situation reveal itself. She trusted the culture to see what it was seeing. She kept her dignity. She kept her carriage. She kept her career moving. That is a woman who has been through worse than this and knows what patience looks like. And in the long game, patience is undefeated. Papoose is going to sort his own situation out one way or another, and Papoose will be judged in the long run by whether the receipts he keeps dropping continue to line up or eventually stop lining up. That is his story to tell, and the record will speak for him. But the broader lesson, the one that applies to every artist and every athlete and every creator watching this video, is that the noise cycle is a trap. The moment you engage the noise, you become the noise. The moment you check everybody, you confirm that the check landed. The moment you jump into a comment section to defend yourself, you tell the algorithm that the accusation is worth boosting. Discipline is silence. Discipline is letting the work speak. Discipline is understanding that the people who are eating in this industry are the people whose off-court, off-ring, off-stage life is boring enough that nobody has anything to talk about except the product. That is the model. That is what Katie Taylor does. That is what Amanda Serrano does. That is what Layla Ali did. That is what the winners in every era have done. And the fighters and artists who cannot resist the noise get eaten by the noise. Every time, without exception. So when you look at Claressa Shields checking everybody, and you look at Remy Ma saying nothing, and you ask yourself who is winning right now, the answer is obvious. The person with the record is not always the person with the win. The person with the piece is the person with the win. And the person with the piece in this story is not the one holding the belts. And this is only the start of what is coming, because the August 15th card in Atlanta is going to be a stress test unlike anything Claressa Shields has faced in her career. And I want you to track 2 specific things when it gets here. First, track the actual paid attendance versus the announced attendance. Not the announced number, the paid number. Reports and independent counts from the venue floor will tell the real story of whether her brand is still moving tickets on its own, or whether the undercard novelty is doing the lifting. Second, track the post-fight interview cycle. If she wins and the interviews stay on boxing, that is a sign the camp has finally taken control of the narrative. If she wins and the interviews immediately drift back to Papoose, to Remy, to the critics, you will know nothing has changed, and the pattern is going to keep eating her career for another year. Either way, this channel is going to be here to break it down in real time, without the spin her camp puts out and without the noise her critics chase. If you want the honest read on every step of this story as it unfolds, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay locked in with us. Because there is more coming, and I am not going anywhere. Now, if this video hit for you, I need to tell you about the one that is dropping next, and I do not want you to leave without hearing this. The next video is on the industry situation that nobody in hip-hop is connecting the dots on yet, the specific reason Papoose has been so publicly aggressive in defending this relationship. And it is not what everybody thinks it is. And when I walk through the timeline of his own career moves alongside the timeline of the Shields relationship, you're going to see a pattern that is going to reframe everything you thought you understood about who is protecting who in this dynamic. There is a name that keeps showing up in both stories, and I have not seen a single other channel touch it. Come with me to the next one. Same energy, same receipts. See you there.